Ismail, good to talk to you. You say in your article the ANC seems to have caved in on two of the EFF's main policies. Start with the first one, which for you is the changing the constitution to effect land expropriation without compensation. Now, firstly, does that not take away momentum from the EFF?
It certainly does take away. Thanks for having me on the show. It certainly does take away momentum, but the mistake that the ANC, I think, are making is to assume that they will get voters away from the EFF. The EFF's voters, I believe, have made up their minds already. So I think the ANC might be. I think they're wrong in going for that, because they're not going to get the EFF voters.
But at this present moment, do you think that people are still looking at land expropriation without compensation as an EFF project? Because it's been all about the ANC for the last year or so.
Well, yes, at one level, everybody seems to think that it's an EFF policy. But the ANC have made it part of their mandate anyway. They have it as part of their mandate. It's just that the ANC appears to have gone very gradualist about this, with this in the last 25 years. The EFF has put it very high up on the agenda, and that is what I think the ANC have had to deal with. Because the ANC, the leader of the ANC, President Ramaphosa, has like 6 or 7 issues that are adding to his pressure, and one is on his left wing is the EFF, and on his right wing is the DA, and they believe that they're bleeding support from the EFF side, so they're trying to, I don't know, force a convergence or a consensus, not by adopting EFF policies, by forcing a convergence, so to speak.
Okay, now the second issue you mentioned is the nationalization of the South African Reserve Bank. And explain to me why you think the EFF will benefit from all this.
Well, the EFF will benefit from it at the level of rhetoric and at the level of ideology. We must remember, there really is nothing to gain for the EFF from nationalization of the South African Reserve Bank. There are 2 or 3 issues that we can look at. One is the perception that the more institutions that can be captured are brought within reach, the EFF will push for that. So as you know, but they're not the only faction. There are factions who have been trying to get their hands on the National Treasury and the South African Reserve Bank. And these seems to be, at the level of perception, they appear to be the last bastions that haven't been captured yet. So at the level of ideology and at the level of perception, that is what the EFF claim to, that's what the EFF believe they can achieve. But nobody has come up with the practical explanations of how the poor and how the unemployed will benefit from a nationalized reserve bank. Because the Reserve Bank has very specific objectives, a very specific mandate, and there needs to be a very serious look at other government departments that have not been doing their job. The Treasury has been doing its job, the Reserve Bank has been doing its job, but it's housing, land affairs, all these other departments that are not doing their job.
It almost seems to me like you're saying, when it comes to the EFF supporters or EFF voters, what matters to them most is really perception and, ideology and all those things. Because now you've got the EFF, they've got a war against the so-called white monopoly capital, the Stellenbosch mafia. That seems to resonate all the time with, their supporters. But really, what is it?
This is the point I tried to make in the Daily Maverick article, is that for I don't believe it's going to be easy for the ANC to get EFF supporters to change their minds. The EFF represents a very angry streak in South African politics. It's an angry streak, it's a streak of revenge politics, it's a streak of retribution, and it's very much sort of a nativist, pro-African streak. And there's a lot of that brewing in the country, and that's what the EFF are tapping into. They're tapping into unhappiness, dissatisfaction, and it's at that level where they're winning the battles. but it's in the practical things. You know, the president of the ANC, if we can just put his name to it, Cyril Ramaphosa, does not have to contend only with the EFF or the DA. He also has to contend with the government, with the economy, with public service, with service delivery. So there are several issues and areas where he has to make compromises and trade-offs. And so he's not only focused only on the EFF because he has so many other things that he's working on. But for the moment, as we approach the election, one will probably see a convergence, and one will see a few compromises made here and there. And the EFF will gain very many propaganda windfalls. Yep. So every time the ANC does something that they agree with, they will claim that it's their policy.
Now, the EFF earlier this month came out and said, listen, they are targeting the Northwest, Limpopo and Gauteng in terms of this upcoming election, gaining more ground on the ANC. What do you think of that? Is that possible? Can they do that?
Yes, they certainly can do it. They certainly can, because those are the areas, we must remember, that are very deprived. There's a lot of poverty, a lot of inequality, a lot of restlessness in those provinces. And that's where they will try to make, to gain. Now, the EFF has been very clever. They've been going around the country quietly, building consensus around their policies. For months now, they've been doing it. And I believe the ANC have taken the voters for granted in very many areas, while the EFF have tried to work really hard in the rural areas. And that's where I think the EFF might actually challenge them quite seriously in rural areas outside of the Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal. In the northern provinces, Northwest, Limpopo, I think the EFF could gain significantly there.
We've seen recently the EFF starting to engage with the elderly community, per se. That was in Ekurhuleni, because we've always seen the EFF as a young party. Why they change their strategy?
Well, because they know one of the things, and here this is, I assume this, one of the problems we have in South Africa is that young people have not been voting. And so they have been trying to encourage young people to vote. So you'll notice that of all the, whatever we may say, good things or bad things that the EFF have been trying to do, they've been trying to get to young people and convince young people that the government has not been working for them. So they've been going to young people, and they've been going to the elderly, because the elderly have been the people who have voted. These are the people who have been voting for the last 25 years. So that's why they're targeting them.
Lastly, Ismail, we have a coalition of the ANC and the EFF, albeit it's a recent coalition in Port Elizabeth. Do you expect any more of this kind of coalitions between these two parties after May the 8th?
Yes, I do. It's clear that there's going to be coalition governments, and it could be between ANC and the EFF, or the ANC and the DA. But the problem with that is, and it's not a problem for me, is at the level of perception. Again, the EFF will milk that as saying the ANC are going into coalition with the White Party. So I expect a lot of that to happen. But the very important factor here is if and where the ANC drops below 50%, that's where we should look. So for the moment, the president of the ANC is working really hard to get over the 60% threshold. If the president gets over the 60% threshold, if the ANC gets that, they have a stronger mandate and they won't need the EFF. But I think in places like Ekurhuleni and Nelson Mandela Bay, they might have to go into coalitions.
Okay, fantastic. So thank you so much, Ismail Lagardien, the political economist, there talking about what may happen after May the 8th general election, of course, and his view of what's happening between the ANC and the EFF at the present moment when it comes to policies.